Alright, so this piece here is really well painted. I like the consistency of the texture that you used in your brush. Um, there are some minor changes that I would recommend. First thing is the breasts. If there's nothing supporting them, first of all, when you guys look at actual breasts of a I'm not going to put them now because it's going to be on YouTube, but if you actually Google, you're probably all going to Google it now because you've been given the ticket to. But if you Google, like, just normal natural breasts, just for a standing figure for a reference, you'll see that they don't really stick together. And the reason why some people draw them as if they're stuck together is because they're drawing symbolically. They're thinking about the time when someone told them boobs are circles, or somewhere along the line they thought, boobs are circles. And so whenever they sketch around this initial symbolic stamp in their visual library. So all the shading and the lighting they're doing, and they don't know they're doing it over top this image in your eye that has been retrieved from your visual library that's telling you that boobs are circles. Boobs aren't circles. Boobs are bags of meat. They're water balloons. The boobs are subject to the pull of gravity. They have like a pull to them. And so, can you guys hear me okay? I need to know that you guys hear me because I'm just going to keep talking. Yes? Okay. All right. Um, so when it comes to these boobs that you've drawn, you've shaded them around the symbolic image of breasts, and I don't recommend that. I recommend giving the breasts some space in between themselves. Even if she's sticking her chest out, it really has nothing to do um, with the way these boobs look naturally. And so what you need to, I'm going to zoom out. Sorry about the quality if I zoom out, but it helps me get the lights. Always zoom out, guys. Um, so yeah, what I'm doing right now is just trying to create a chest, the look of a chest. I'm trying to incorporate some basic skeletal structure, symmetrical strokes to represent where the rib cage would be ever so slightly, nothing too severe. What you've done with the collarbone, you've also outlined the collarbone as well, and that's another thing that comes out of your symbolic memory. Remember that symbolic memory is built with lines. Lines outline where, the actual symbol itself. It's a very flat way of remembering something. So don't remember with lines, remember with shades and colors. Remember with large shadows, and remember, try to build a memory of how things look with the shades, incorporated shades that work around the form and the structure of the image that the object it is, what the object is that you're trying to shade. Um, so what I'm doing right now is I'm giving a more realistic rendition of this chest area. And it's not taking away from the image at all. It's not disrupting what this image is all about. Also, I feel like it's cut off too soon. There's such a point of interest here at the chest area of this character, and then you've just cut it off. I recommend sort of taking it down further um, and bringing in some basic lights and shadows for the chest and breast area. So you got that space, over here, and then you've got the basic shadows. I can't go in and render it all for you, but I recommend taking it further. So something like that. Breasts do have a space between them, and don't forget that space because it's part of the full function of what's happening here with the chest. Build your lights upward as if they're building towards a high point on the breast area. If you don't want to show the breasts, and that's why you crop them like that, just find a way to cover them up. There's nothing wrong with nudity in your image as long as you're not showing it to kids. but yeah, it's just some general shades. Make sure there's a space in between the breasts. Another thing about the face here is you don't have enough of a shadow in between the eyebrows. And what that would read as, if you were looking at the face from the side, is you would read, this big lump, and then the nose where you have the dip. So this dip is telling me there's a dip here, and then you've got the lips, and then the upper lip is darker than the bottom lip, and then you've got the chins catching some light. But here on the eyes, there's no shadow here telling me there's a dip. So we've got shadow here, shadow here, shadow here, shadow here, dip, dip. Both dips into the profile view, and then we've got a shadow here under the upper lip dip, but then we've got no shadow for the eyebrow area. And if you don't have it, what that will read as is this. It will read as straight to the nose tip from the forehead. And the reason why I'm reading that is because the shade here doesn't change. What I need to see is an actual shade change. So we're seeing pretty much the same shade on this area. What I would need is this dip right here telling me that there is an indentation happening in between both eyebrows. Okay? Everybody paying attention? Also, the shadow of the nose is a bit sharp, just a little softer, please. And don't forget about light spots, the essential light spots on the face. So there's a light spot for the upper lip area, ever so slightly. Just so that we're showing that the upper lips move out, catching some of that light source. And we've got the cheekbones also have light source on them. So they are light spots. This side darkness on either side of the nose, make sure that happens very, very softly. You don't need that much of it doesn't need to be that much stated. There is a shadow of the inner eyebrow over the rest of the face that looks something like that. A little less sharp, but it's something that looks like that. So try to incorporate that in there. And wherever the shadow stops, that's where the highlights on the eyelids begin. So we have this kind of highlight here. Okay, sorry. Right here on the eyelids. And then we've also got waterline highlights from the light source, being caught by the light source. And those happen on just the areas that are outside of that cast shadow. Good job shading the paled out blind eyes. Usually people overdo those, but you did it very subtly, and that works. Also, the lower half of her body, the lower half of her face is a bit long. Let me just point it to you. What happens is, we're just going to shrink it, increase the density, and then shrink it, and then push it up. The lower lip, the lip and the nose area were a bit tucked in. They weren't tucked in enough. They were a bit overstretched. So before, after. Do you see the difference? Before, after, before, after. And those are very difficult to see if you're not moving your canvas around. If you move your canvas around, you'll notice that there might be a bit of an over-lengthening happening. Okay, so we've got this light source that's making this face visible, and you've painted this face in this kind of light source because this is how you know how to paint a face, right? So the reason why there's an issue in this image because of the light source is because it seems like everything is responding to a different light source. Even if you painted it well, even if you rendered it as well as you did here, good job, by the way, it's a beautiful painting. You still need to make sure everything is responding to the same light source. So what I'm seeing in my mind is the light source is moving around this form, this head, where it's the lightest up here, and then we've got little pieces of the light pointing back to where the light source is. So we've got 1, 2, 3. So everything here seems to be pointing towards a light source that's coming from above. It's not this light source. This is not the light source, because if this was the light source and it's on top of her head, her whole head would be in shadow. So where this light source is coming from is the Rembrandt lighting. It's coming from the top at a 45-degree angle. So what we would need to see is this type of response along the tops of any of the objects, just on the top half of their structure, responding to this light source in this way. So we need to cast these shadows and these highlights in a way that responds to the light source uniformly, so it doesn't seem like everything that has a different light source. So the hair on her head would need light cast like that. Just going to get some real shadows being thrown over the face. Remember, half of the face is shadow, and the things that are interrupting the shadow are the light spots. But the rest of the face is in shadow, and we need to see a larger shadow cast on the sockets the eye sockets and between the eyes, because this is a severe sort of lighting that's happening. There wasn't enough light cast over the eyes and in between the eyebrows before. So right now what I'm doing is I'm using a soft brush to sort of throw a haze of that shadow over everything. And this thing here, I recommend rethinking its intensity, because there's two ways you could do this. You could shrink this and make it a pin light that's sort of revealing the major outlines along the head shape. So we'd get outlines like that, which I recommend. I recommend this option because now it's not taking over the entire image and it can be a separate piece. Or you can make it the light source, and that would mean that everything has to be really, really dark around this main image. So this would be the principal focal point, and everything else would be secondary. And I don't recommend that because that doesn't make a very good composition. One second. What I do recommend, excuse me, there's cat hair everywhere, is this option right here, shrinking it down and using it as a pin light or a secondary light source to diffuse coarse shadows caused by the primary light source, which isn't on the screen. So this, you have to always make sure that you know what your light source is and what you're going to do with it. So I recommend shrinking that down, making it sort of like a hovering light source in between these pieces here. And that way it'll work as a small flame in between her horns, casting that light everywhere. And make sure that it's not that intense a light, so it's not that severe and it's not that demanding. So I'm just going to soften it up just a little bit. By the way, welcome everyone who I haven't welcomed. Thank you for coming today. All the newcomers. You know, I start off and I wait 10 minutes and then that's still never nobody ever comes in. They always come in at the very end, or at the very end, yeah, and a little bit later than the start date or start time. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do just that. I'm going to do the secondary pin light, just traveling across the edges here of her hair. I'm not sure where the edge of her hair is because it's sort of, her horns are emerging from. A little bit of light traveling across her head, just a little. And then we've got some horn edge light. Okay. And then we've got the major light that's responding from this light source onto the side of this horn. So you need to choose a part that is getting the most exposure and is responding to the most straight or parallel. I have a video on that. I know it's always weird when I talk about how lighting works because it's just such a lengthy subject. But what I recommend is getting a good reference, seeing how that reference sort of, getting like a lamp beside a plate or inside a plate and seeing how the sides of the plate get that light on them, and seeing how sometimes there's parts that are always the lightest and there are parts that are just not as light as others because the light isn't that directly exposed to the smooth flat surface area facing that one light source. Also, these parts are facing away from the light, so what would happen is they would get a little bit of darkness right over here. And most of the light would be limited to the face of the horns that are facing this light source right here. So now we've separated it. We've separated the light sources from each other. We have nice control over the primary light source that's being cast on the body, and then the secondary light source here that's being cast around the outside. So this is sort of a more organized way to approach the light source situation in your image. Okay, and I recommend extending the canvas a little bit so that we can see more of your character. Cutting it off awkwardly like that will leave more to be desired. You want to always provide the best presentation. Good job on the hair, by the way. I really like the way you've just painted the lights of the hair in curves along the curls of the hair, instead of just throwing them as basic gradients, and you're responding to the light source as well, which is nice. So that's pretty much it. It's a more organized sort of light source. than what we had before. I'll show you the before and after. Before. Take a look at the breasts as well. They seem very, very artificial and flat. And unless something or a corset or something is there pushing those two breasts together, they wouldn't really sit like that naturally. Before and then after. We've separated the light sources. We've brought the face down a little bit more. We've pushed the face, the lower half of the face, up a little bit. And after. We've extended the canvas so that it responds to or presents this subject very well, which is a very long sort of headdress, and we want to have enough space to do that. Yeah, boobs again. Get a good reference as well for the chest area to know exactly where to place in the rib cage and the whole bone versus flesh system here in the chest. Alright, next up is, I won't be able to do everybody, so I'm just choosing ones that match and theme. Oh, that's landscape. That's character design, I guess that works. This one I'm going to throw a quick little liquefy. One eye is a little bit larger than the other, so I'm just going to increase it and show you where that other eye was sitting. Good job on the nose, good job on the lips. Just the eye was extremely, extremely small. Now that I fixed it, it looks a bit defocused, so we have to push the focus back so it looks like the eye is looking in the same direction. And I'm going to push the brows down as well. So before, after, before, after. Excuse me, by the way. You see how before you had a little bit of a shrinking involved, and there is no foreshortening happening with 3/4 view. Please remember that there is no foreshortening. What happens with the face is it just compresses, but there is no there's no perspective that's happening. There's no immediate perspective where you need actual vanishing points and one eye in the distance is actually smaller than the other. There's no such thing as that, just with a simple rotation of the head. What happens is just a tiny bit of compression happens. Objects stack in front of each other. We don't see one of the quarters of the face. We only see 3 of the quarters. And that's it. There's no shrinking of the distant eye. Please remember that. Okay? Saving that. Alright, I'm going to do this one now. A couple things. The first thing that popped out at me is the background. You don't really need all of this with a character set up like that. I feel like you're just putting that in there because you feel like you have to represent it or you have to present it in a certain way. You can see the theme of today's critique is all about presentation. So you don't need all of that. For a character design, if there's no storyline into the image that you're drawing, if there's no gesture, if it's just there to be, just to stand there to be looked at, I recommend adding the whole body. Because at this point, you're just at this point you're just doing a stand-up character, a character design concept, where you have to see the actual standing character and show every part of their design. So it's just to clean it up a little bit, to not have messy presentation, I recommend just extending this canvas so that we see the entirety of the character in their pose, so that it works as that, just as the pose. And that way we get sort of the full feel of this character. I'm just trying to lasso in a gesture here. Forgive me if it's horrible. And I need more space. Give me a second. Okay, so this is the one boot. I think. And this is the other boot behind her. No, that's too much. No. What the hell am I doing? Let's just sketch it. I'm sorry, I can't cheat with lasso, guys. Give me a minute. Um, so she's sounding like... and that. Okay. So, yeah. This is the sort of the kind of sketch that would be better to go with for this character. Just give us the whole body of the character and what they're doing. Also, for design purposes, like I said, unless there's a story going on with this setup here, make the eyes look forward. This is a portrait, but a full body portrait. So what you would be doing is you have to present this character, showcase them, exhibit them. And this is what you're going to be expected to do if you're a concept artist. You're going to be asked to make the character just look as if they're being shown off, as if you're showing off their design for the modeler or whatever. And so what we're doing here is we're just trying to create a setting where this character can be showed off the best. So if we've got the canvas cropped too early, or if we've got some weird background color just being thrown over it for composition or for design purpose only, it serves no purpose other than to look nice. Get rid of all that stuff and give the character some space, because at this point the most important thing is presenting this character and us being able to see their design, their costume, their weapon. That's where we see the story of the character. If there's no story actually happening in the canvas, if there's no storytelling happening in the canvas, then you have to tell the story with the character. And if the character's cropped off, you have pretty much zero anything. There was no gesture, there was no background, actual visible background. She wasn't talking to anyone, so why was she looking up? That kind of stuff. So make sure you have a good focused character design presentation happening, so that we can actually enjoy the character and see what they're all about. Okay, so I made her look forward. As for the background color, you don't really need a background color that is colored when you're doing character design, so that you could get hired one day, so that you can really enjoy your sort of character a little bit better and not have to worry about background at all. I recommend just getting rid of the background color completely and just giving us a gray background. That way it becomes all about the character. That way it becomes all about what the character is wearing, what the character is doing, what the character is, what we're seeing from the story. So she's partially girly, she's a tomboy, something like that. We want to see more about the character. Giving us a little blurb about the character design as well really helps. Stop trying to make your studies illustrations or masterpieces, and stop trying to make stuff that just isn't a masterpiece into some sort of background presented, super spotlighted character. Sometimes just have a character with a gray background. Have it just for the heck of it, because that's what we want. If we're gonna be hiring you, that's what we want to see. We want to see that you can, without a background, create a concise character, a character that has been thought through concept-wise meaning the concept of the whole story behind them, and how that story is reflected in their costume, in their weapon, in their stance, in their attitude, whether or not there's a smile, the color of their hair, what they've done to themselves, like the body art, scars. That's where we get the story. We don't get the story with a pink, splashy, messy background. And just keep it neat. Don't throw a bunch of stuff you don't need just because you can, or just because you feel like you need it. A gray background is dignified, and there's great respect for it, and don't worry too much about presenting it. I can't say that enough. So before I was a little bit confused. You just had this setup going on. And she was looking up. There was no real background behind her for me to appreciate her glance at something in the distance. You just had this rough stroke that was sort of interrupting. It had more detail in it than the rest of the image combined. It had more detail in the background. Really disruptive. The color was too vibrant as well. And now the character's standing on their own. Now you have a lot of opportunity to go in and start, adding some detail, adding some real fun to it, and not worry about the background. All your focus is going to be drawn towards the character. I'm just going to shrink her head just a little because it was a little big for her body, and I don't think you noticed that starting out because the body was cropped off. When you crop off too early, it has a big effect on the proportions. Give yourself some space. Give yourself all the space in the world, and then crop after you're done. Don't crop early because that's going to mess up how you paint the image. How you paint the proportions, how you paint the spine, how you paint the back, or the length of the character. Crop later. Give yourself lots of space. Her chin is a bit large. Her lips are a bit large. This is just to keep her beautiful, but also make her seem like a tomboy. So if you want to have a gender in your image, but you want to make them tomboyish, don't take away their gender. Introduce the tomboyishness in their clothing, in the way they carry themselves. Unless they've actually gone under sexual reassignment, whatever it's called, surgery, they're going to still look like a woman. So try to keep that in your images as well. Don't confuse the gender because that could look really uncanny and it could look like an eyesore. So avoid that in your images. I'm just going to give her a bit more of a slender nose, less high. I'm going to show you sort of what that did for her character. It made her look a lot more beautiful, a lot more put together. So before you had the oversized head, and then you had the oversized lips and the oversized nose, and the face wasn't really brought together, but now her head sort of shrunk back. Now you have this clean background, that's check, and then you have good proportions, that's check. You have space for the character on all sides of the character, check, check, check. So all that's left now to do is to go in and start detailing and start, cleaning up. And the cleanup is honestly for me the most fun part of the whole image. It means that I don't have to worry about the background. All I have to really focus on is this character, and I have to focus all my detail and all my attention on them. So I don't have that much of an anxiety to deal with for background stuff, and that way I can use all that time to complete this character, finish it up, and present it in my portfolio, and know that this is as much as I can do for a character design. That all my skills and talents are being showcased here. And that's really fun, and that's really good for you guys, to not have to worry about the backgrounds when you don't have to. Show the employer, whoever you want to hire you later, show your audience, whatever, that you're good for this, that you can actually detail and present and think about different levels of detail that are needed for a character concept. Okay. Also, same old jargon I always talk about. Don't confuse your light sources. Choose a specific light source and follow it. Make sure the color for the skin that you use is consistent all around. So you've got these shades here happening with the skin. Like you've got this shade here. It should be the opposite for this arm. It should be the light is here and the shades are back here because that's where the light would be coming from. The light would be coming from over here, touching all the light areas, just like that. All the light areas and all the further edges of the cube would get the dark spots. And that's how you should shade this. You should not try to freestyle your whole shading process throughout the image. I recommend actually finding the light source first before doing anything. So all of a sudden a list has come about, and the list is back. That good old list, meaning that when you design your character, make sure that you have enough space. You've thought about what the character is needing. So if they're going to need a sword, you're going to give yourself a little bit of space to present the sword. You've tested out different gestures to make the gesture more appealing. Right now this gesture is pretty boring. Try to find a gesture that would present her character well. We don't have a background. So what we want to do is present as much about this character as possible with her gesture, with her clothing, with her costume, with her expression, with her face. Try to remember that it's really important to organize your process before jumping in and having fun with the character. So finding the list, meaning find your canvas space, try out a couple of gestures, and then just decide with your employer or whoever it is that you're working with to design this character what kind of costume they're wearing, have a little blurb about this character design, and then jump in and start choosing the gesture you want to work with and then rendering it. And make sure you render it without a background if this is a character design setup. Character design usually lineups or turnarounds don't have backgrounds, usually. If you might have one graphic background, some like weird little line happening, something like that, where you'd have some sort of complementary tone happening in the background. But that's pretty much all you can do, and even then it's a bit of an interruption. You don't really need it that much. So think about that for your next character design. You have a beautiful sort of, approach to this character. It's got a lot of personality. Find some good references for leather, find some good references for feathers, for all the stuff that you're going to need. And then after that, it's going to be safe. When you have your list and you have your references set up and you have your gesture design and you've planned this character design, this whole thing from A to Z before you even started painting. The anxiety is escaped. You escape the anxiety. Um, and the anxiety factor is the sort of thing that gets you messed up. It's the thing that makes you think you need a background that's bright pink. It's the kind of stuff that leads you to chicken scratch. Anxiety is the kind of thing that makes you feel like you're not going to be able to do this because there's just too much to think about. When if you think about the main functions, the main aspects of design, the main design technique, how you're going to approach the canvas, how you're going to organize the canvas, how it's going to look, how you want it to look at the end. You've gotten rid of all the anxiety. All that's left is the fun, the real fleshing out of the character. And I recommend going with this organized way of approaching your painting from now on. Okay, and then this one is a landscape. This is a photo study. I am going to... Alright, I'm going to touch on this one. This is a pretty piece, but it's got a lot of issues, lots of issues. Whoever painted this character, I recommend, if I'm using this as a diagnostic for where you are currently in your art, I recommend painting in grayscale from now on. Because what grayscale will do is it will force you to think about the tones of the colors that are sitting underneath all the pure hue of the image. So when we're thinking about pure hue, as someone pointed to me before, I didn't have the term for it, thank you. When we have pure hue, it means whether it's red, blue, or purple. That hue is the actual color part of the color. The value is how dark that color is. So what you have a problem with is you don't understand that yet, and you're not applying that in your image. You're welcome, Tommy. Meaning, look at where your colors were before. They were so messy, and they were really picked, is that the right word? They were picked from really random areas of the color map. You have to start avoiding color from now on. I know that's really weird and that's a bad way to think about studying, but for now, I really need you to focus only on the values. Try to match the values. When we turn on this color layer here and we'll look only at your values, forget the colors, there's a serious value problem happening in your painting. We've got this bright, super bright white happening. We've got this really dark eyeliner that's working like a black hole. So you've got white whites, no man's whites, and dark darks. Like you are picking colors from the worst areas of the color wheel right now. Then you've got the super dark red, rich red that you really need to sort of, you need to discover a new language for your colors. Meaning you have to update your color language, and the way you've memorized the color, so your color vocabulary. When you paint, when I say red, you probably think of the most primary basic red there is. When someone says to a professional artist the word red, what comes in their mind is tons of different kinds of reds. Pale reds, pastel reds, purple reds, orange reds. For me right now, it seems like this is the only red you've really acquainted yourself with, and this is the red that does not match this image. Also, you've got a serious sort of problem with the way you're looking at skin tones. Skin tones are way more peachy, way less gray. You've got actual grays here, and the reason, yeah, actually greens actually, and the greens that you have are counteracting the pinks in the blush that you've placed in. So what's happened is that you've used complementary tones and skin on top of each other. What happens is that when you look at the color wheel, red is the opposite of green. Red and green don't mix. When you try to mix those two together, theoretically they should turn gray or turn into a murky brown if you're using acrylics. They don't complement each other. There is no vibrancy in their interaction. So what we need to do here is push this direction. Do you see what happened? Now there's a more relatable redness in her skin tone, and yeah, it's made all the other colors a little bit more different, but they now match. Before they were green. There was just this green over everything, and this means that you do not have a thorough color vocabulary, meaning that you don't know that maybe somehow you've entered the greens and you haven't realized it. You're not aware or not careful enough or not aware to be careful of complementary tones when they're used on top of each other in an image. So this is all too much color problems for me to just throw at you and say go fix your colors. No, for me to really care for your issue and tell you the right the right kind of advice, I would have to say stop using color. Use grayscales. Get acquainted with the tones that sit under colors. Learn this. You think you're not using color when you're painting in grayscale? You're wrong. You're still understanding the colors. You're still dealing with color when you're painting in grayscale. Why, Istebrak, there are no colors? Yes, there are no colors, but you are still understanding that there needs to be a shade difference, a buildup of shade. There still needs to be a reaction to the light source. There still needs to be darker versions and lighter versions of these shades in order for us to tell the difference between empty space and a character. So for now, work on your color tones. Work on what needs to be dark and what needs to be light. Because if I were to say you go and fix your values as well as your colors, that's way too much to throw on a student. What I need to tell you to do is stop using colors for now. Use some grayscales, get acquainted with the tones, get acquainted with what's too light and too dark, and then you can start jumping into color later on after you've spent enough time on grays and feel confident enough to jump into colors. So where do you have too much light? You've got too much light in the hair right off the bat. You don't have enough light in the face responding to the light source. You've got way too much darks happening over here. The face is extremely masculine because of the way that you've painted the cheekbones. You've overstated the gender signifiers that it's become a caricature of the gender. The nose is a bit large. I'm not saying that nose like this in real life is large. I'm saying that because we're designers, we're people who want to work with what's pretty. We have to know what's pretty in order to recreate it. I know it's a very vain practice, pretty much. You're going to have to draw the prettiest version of anything out there in order for people to like your work. And that's sort of the sad truth. When you start sort of getting sick of that pretty face, get sick of using that pretty face, you're going to start finding the organic. You're going to start going back to what comes out of using references. And what comes out of that is the real face, the human face with asymmetrical errors to it or inconsistencies with those tiny little nuances. But for now, learn the pretty face, the basic face, so Riot can hire you, and learn how to paint big boobs because God knows they love that. Bunch of perverts. And sort of get better with the way you render faces, get a little bit more references going. So I'm just placing in some really basic lights to bring in back her feminine quality. And still, there are so many issues happening with the hair, lightness, and there's not enough time, there's not enough focused into the head. The face is too small for the head. Actually, her fringe would cover the entire space of her eye. So what would happen is something like this. So her face was too small for her head, and I'm just throwing the fringe over here. Her bangs or whatever it's called. This neck piece has made her neck look huge, so that's part of the reason why she looked masculine then as well. You might want to shrink that down, give her neck a bit more of a feminine slender to it. And her shoulders were a bit large as well. So there's just so much to talk about. I can't really just force you into. I'm going to have to let you ease into these issues on your own. But as a starting point to sort of give you a little bit of a head start on what you need help with, it's definitely an issue of color and value, but not just that. There's a figure and anatomy issue going on here. And I can't just, tell you go fix it or go become a better artist. I have to give you a place to start. And you just have to ask yourself where you want to get better and what you want to draw better sooner. And if you want to draw better characters sooner, I recommend getting into some portrait studies, some figure drawing studies, some basic value studies, draw some cubes, get some form going in your image. And then after all of that, you can start playing around with gestures. And then maybe after you've perfected character design, not perfected it, but have it, entered an intermediate level at least with your character design, I recommend uh, getting into landscapes and getting into all of that messy stuff. But for now, really get better acquainted with your color vocabulary. The colors are really, really messy. And there was a serious issue with the way you read colors in a reference, or read colors from references or from life, and then translate them onto this 2D surface. So I'm going to just do a quick before and after. There is a color issue, but ignore that. I kind of got rid of the expression. Sorry, I should have a cute expression going. Do you see that color issue? Just with the hue saturation change. No, I don't. Got rid of it. Before, after. I sort of made her face a little bit more feminine, and then I pushed in her little neck piece. It's still really not fitting with her hairstyle. I'm just going to let you sort of think about all of this, and you can contact me again for the rest of the issues you might have. Okay, so for this image here, what we have is an attempt to do three-dimensional onto two-dimensional outlines, but the outlines are removed, and what you had left was the actual shape, the outline of her body. What you had before was that sort of flat cartoon anime chin that was happening, that sort of, it enters into a really sharp triangle. Get rid of that, because what that does is it only flattens your work. It really does nothing unless you're trying to create some sort of mix, some sort of hybrid between flat and realistic, and that's always really tricky. So all I'm doing is I'm just giving a little bit of less of a sharpness to that chin transition from the bottom of the ear toward the chin and the jawline. And I'm giving a bit more softness here on the side. I'm lowering her nose just a little bit so it sits on her face as a snout would, instead of it being confused into the space of the eye. Everything has its own space. Make sure the nose isn't taking up space in the eye area. The eye is a bit large. I know you want it to be cute, but she will still look cute if her eye is just a little bit smaller. Tasteful. Be tasteful with your scaling. Don't just make it big and just, oh, it's big, yeah. I mean, you can get away with it. You can get away with really big eyes, huge eyes. You can get away with it. But it just doesn't look right if you're trying to render three-dimensionally. If you want it to look right, but still have that cuteness involved, it'll read. So I push the nose down to create that snout look. So if this is before, after. Do you see it's a little bit more readable? The nose is less pig-like, I guess you can call it. The eye is less caricature-y. It's just a small change in the size, but it's done so much for the realism. It's fit her eyes back into her skull. Then we've got her chin was really sharp before, and now it's a lot smoother. So that being said, alright, rule number 1 of all hair painting rendering rules: do not use one size pixel brush to paint hair. Okay? Never, 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 never do that. All of you listening. The reason why, okay, this is again symbolic memory of what hair looks like. So remember how I talked about this before in my tutoring just now. Boobs are circular, and so that's how you remember boobs, and that's how you draw boobs accidentally. There's that symbolic stamp in your brains, in your visual library, that's messing you up and not letting you render properly. Then for eyes, it's this. People always give me this really slanted, elongated anime eye. This is symbolic. When it comes to hair, how do they remember hair? They remember hair as being many, many strands. So it's, oh, many strands. I'll just get a small brush and start making many strands. No! No! I can't say this enough. Please stop doing this. No, you can't use it for hyperrealism because in hyper you don't see every single little strand. You see a pixelation or an artifact in a place where you would see many tiny little strands. Unless you're an eagle and unless you have 100 million 80p vision, unless you're seeing super hyper detail more like a vampire, then you wouldn't see that. What the eye does. Right now, look at your mirror reflection. Look at someone in the room with you. Get a photograph and look at it. What you will see is the way your eyes mix things together. Your eyes blur stuff together. What you see instead of many tiny strands, you see chunks, sections, pieces. They piece together. They act as one unit instead of many million types of strands floating in their own space. Stop using small pixels, small 1 pixel wide brushes. Messy hair is different. There is flyaway hair. And you only get to that level when you've done enough large strokes. So what I always say is large to small. Get a large brush. And I have a tutorial about this on YouTube. Please watch it. It's there. It's free. It's there for you guys. What I usually do for hair is I get the large pieces considered, and then I shrink my brush and I keep painting, and then finally I get to the small strokes. And then when I really have some light touching these small strokes, I shrink my brush to be 1 pixel width. And that's like only a couple strokes I can afford to. And now it looks like some sort of angel hair or something. Because I've considered the large pieces. I've treated the hair as one unit. And after I've treated the hair as one unit, shaded it as if it's one large three-dimensional unit, I can go in and add some detail. That is the rule of the universe, larger to smaller. Okay, and the small does construct the large, but unfortunately, boys and girls, we don't have that third dimension in our canvas. We only have 2 dimensions, up and down to the sides. We don't have in and out. We don't have the interdimensional jump that we have in the real world. In the real world, we can stretch your hand out and it enters space. Over here in the 2 dimensions of the canvas, you don't have, if you stretch your hand out, you're just going to hit the monitor. You're going to hit the wall. You're not going to be able to stretch your hand out, all right? Watch Carl Sagan's Flatlanders example. He'll explain that to you. So that's what I mean about hair. Please paint in chunks. Use a large stroke. I should not be seeing every single little hair. This is hyper detailed. This is just dragging my eyes in all kinds of directions. I've entered the twilight zone of hair, of detail. And that shouldn't be because I'm barely seeing any lashes on this girl. You're telling me right now, if we're seeing every one of your hairs here, you're telling me she has only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lashes altogether. When we paint eyelashes, what we do is we throw a bunch of strokes, so we just create a little mess here. And that reads as many eyelashes, but we haven't painted every eyelash, have we? We've just represented the eyelashes with 1 stroke, and that's fine. Same thing with hair. Please don't forget that. Alright, for this, let me just, because that's a photorealistic image. For this Anivia painting, okie dokie, you have, I respect the fact that you tried this. You really did just jump into a really difficult composition type, and you did it. There is a list that I talk about all the time. If you guys follow that list, you will be safe. When you have a landscape, and you want to have a character in the landscape, paint the landscape first, and then paint the character. I'm not asking you to detail every little rock of the landscape. All I'm saying is choose where the horizon line is, choose where the sun will be, and then choose where the major values will be. This is really best done in grayscale. If you find this in grayscale, if you do it in grayscale, you will choose your major tones, your major cast shadows, what mountain is casting the longest shadow on the water, what part of the water is catching the light. And then after you've decided that, you then can introduce the character. In landscape, it's a whole other ball game. You have to deal with atmospheric fade. You have to deal with scale. You have to deal with stacking and the way to casting shadows, treating all the objects as if they're three-dimensional. You have to make sure that you're representing material, so trees reflect light differently than the surface of the water and the surface of the snow. The kind of colors that you want to have. And then finally, when you want to jump into color, then you're going to have the wash of the landscape. So the general, if it's going to be a blue painting, it's going to be a purple painting. There's no such thing as a rainbow painting. There's always one governing light color, something, some sort of filter that's happening. Even our eyes have a yellow filter on it that we have to turn off when we look at stars, so we can get their real magnitude. So everything has a filter and everything has a basic color washing over it, especially when we're looking at a landscape. Find that color. You as the artist have to be aware of that color. Find it. Um, but honestly, Ista, know the rule to break it. What I don't say know the rules and then break them. I say you can't break rules unless you know them. And if you don't, you won't know all the rules yet or be wise enough to break them until way later. Until way later in your art careers. The main rule is follow the rules. And later when you want to really excel and you get bored of using the rules, and by this time your images are amazing, by the way, then you can start breaking the rules and entering a different sort of way of entering a style, basically. Um, so get the hue going in that image, get that basic wash, and you'll be good. So what you didn't do is I don't see a horizon line up Nova. I don't see a scale. I see scale issues. She's too big. The landscape looks like the inside of a snowball. What's that snow globe? Um, Instead of what actually this character is small. Even if you had a humongous bird, the bird in the landscape would be really small compared to everything else. So let me show you what I mean. So the order is find the landscape. Maybe the landscape is a bit high because she's flying and we're looking down. So if it's bird's eye view, the landscape is high. That's a rule you don't know unless someone tells you about it or you observe enough landscapes. If you're a worm's eye view, you get more sky than ground because you're too low to the ground to see more ground. But if you're high, you see more ground than sky because you are in the sky. All right, so it's a high landscape. You had that pretty well chosen. It's a high horizon line. You had that going. After you choose the horizon line, choose the vanishing points, or they might be outside the canvas, and then choose the sun, where the sun is going to be. Choose the kind of sunset, whatever. Then start choosing your color palette. What's the main color going to be? So let's say it's going to be a blue color to complement Anivia. And then we're going to have some slight purples. You're still in the same neighborhood. We haven't jumped into orange-red. We're still in the colors that derive from the main wash that we chose. So we're jumping into cooler, a little bit of a turquoise happening. Anivia does have a bit of that turquoise, that teal. And then what's going to happen after that is I'm going to choose the major units in the image. So I'm going to have one mountain here, one mountain here, one mountain here, I guess. And then Anivia would be somewhere in here, traveling, flying through. And so what we're going to get is a canvas that is organized. The scale is taken care of. You can even make her smaller so that she fits, so that the scale of her makes the landscape around her even more epic, because this humongous character is sort of sitting against this humongous background. So imagine how big this landscape will be. Shrinking the size of the sun also increases the scale of the landscape. Finding just deciding what kind of river you're going to have, what kind of units in the landscape you're going to have, choosing the wash, choosing the light source, and then choosing where you're going to cast some shadows. So this mountain's going to cast a shadow here, this mountain's going to cast a shadow here. So this is organizing your image before you jump in and start coloring. What you did here is I think you painted the character first, and then you threw some light behind it. If you learn anything today, it's trust the list, guys. This is what I always say to everyone. I tutor, every critique I've ever done is there is a list to follow. Trust that list. That list sort of guides you through. It removes the anxiety factor. It makes sure that you're not making really deep mistakes that if you made them, your image will suffer a lot. And if you didn't make them, it's the difference between beginner and intermediate looking image. It's that big a jump, trust me. So organize your images. I know that was a bit of a rush for the Anivia landscape one because there's sort of so much to talk about. I can't really talk about it all the rules of landscape and stuff. For this image here, I've been looking at it. One of the biggest issues, I'm just going to point to them with some red marker because you did use a photo reference, so you're going to have to go back to that reference and look at it again and reread what you're looking at. This finger is almost, it's really weirdly rendered so it looks like a stub, like she lost her finger, instead of the actual bend that happens of the stacking. So you're going to have to find the front face of the finger and then the side, and then draw the part of the finger that's facing away, and then draw the nail on it. So I'm going to point to that actually with the red right here, not orange, red. Alright, and then we've got this green. This is not a green that can come from this this image. So basically what I would do, think about it as if there was a camera and there was a filter on that camera. How would that camera filter change the colors that are in this image? So this wouldn't be a green, this is a forest green. This is the kind of green that you would get out of a leaf. He's not really a leaf. So what we want to do is make that green a little bit more purple. I mean a little bit more blue. So take it to the blues. Actually, I'm not just going to use a red marker. I'm just going to paint over a little. And make that green. It'll look green still, but it will be a green that will match the pinks and purples in her cheeks to make it seem like they're from the same environment. So now it matches a little better. Even these yellows here were a bit off. They would look more gray than yellow. Then there's the issue of her tattoos. When tattoos happen, they can look gray, which looks like green, but it's not. It's gray. They can look blue, or they can have the colors, or they can look completely black. But in this case, the way you've made this tattoo is you've made it look green, as if they use the color green. So again, you don't need much to show that the color is there. And I recommend just throwing a turquoise, a green that has a bit of blue in it so it can match a little bit better. Also, whenever you have tattoos or any artifacts on the body, they're also subject to the highlights that happen from the light source. Another thing that is happening, so highlight the tattoos where the light is hitting the body. This collarbone area is protruding a little bit. You might want to touch that up. You use the dancing dragon, crouching tiger, whatever, girl, actress. Beautiful job capturing her face. There are some symmetry issues, but I'm not sure if that's actually what her face looks like. Give me some more detail for her hair. Try to find, actually, just larger strokes, and then smaller strokes. Okay, more detail for her hair because it's just hyper detailed over here. It's not complete. It's not a complete image. Also, you might want to border the image a little bit better, so throwing off some shadow over here might do well to sort of refocus all the attention back to her because she's sort of disappearing. When you have complete highlights going to the edge of the image, that's wrong. You're telling me that there is information, all of a sudden it was cut off. That's wrong. You should sort of, it's like fading away music. Same thing. Fade away gradually. Tell our eyes where to go. You are the director and this is your movie. Tell us where we should be looking. Okay? Might want to throw in like a shadow like that, you know, something interesting. Rocket launcher attachment. But good job to everyone who sent in a piece today. You have courage. To send in something for critiquing is like putting your head on the slab, or you know, under the guillotine or something. It's tough hearing someone blab and talk shit about your art. I hope that the advice I gave you was worth it. It was worth sitting through it. Something interesting might happen to you after taking a critique, and that interesting thing is improvement. And that doesn't happen just out of the blue one day you wake up and you've improved. It happens out of hard work, and part of hard work is taking a critique and jumping out of the tunnel vision that you might have developed. Tunnel vision is a disease artists suffer from. It's like the cancer of the art world. Not being able to tell where your mistakes are, and drawing and thinking they look right and thinking your images look good, and the whole time you're like, holy crap, what have I been doing this whole time? So remember, try to get as many critiques as you can from your friends, from your mom, from your grandma, Any little bit counts because that's your audience. Yeah, you say my grandma can't draw a stick figure, but that's your audience. She still has a brain that knows what realistic looks like. She can still tell the difference between a cartoon and a human. So trust her. Ask your grandma. Hey, grandma, does this look weird? She'll tell you, whoa, that neck looks a bit long for me. I don't know, her neck looks a bit long. And I don't know, something like that. Okay, thank you very much and have a great day. Bye-bye, guys.